Welcome to the UNNI Podcast. I'm your host, Bianca McCall, and today our journey begins in the fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, and it takes us across the globe to connect with heroes in their own rights in the space of suicide prevention to help us reach a cure for suicide. Thank you to our listeners from around the world and survivors from all spaces and walks of life for sharing your stories responsibly. The UNNI Podcast is now an affiliate of the Mental Health News Radio Network, the only podcast network in existence, serving as a beacon for mental health and wellness information, testimony, and resources. This is a trigger warning for episodes 16 and 17, A Pedophile in Full Groom. This episode discusses sexual assault and or violence, which may be triggering to survivors. This is an attempt to forewarn audiences of content that may cause intense physiological and psychological symptoms, especially for those with a history and lived experiences with sexual abuse, psychological distress such as anxiety, depression, and suicidality. For our U.S. audience, calling the National Sexual Assault Hotline gives you access to a range of free services that include confidential support from trained staff members, supports finding local health facilities that are trained to care for survivors of sexual assault, and offers services like sexual assault forensic exams. There are those that are there to help you talk about what's happened. They can link you with local resources that can assist you with next steps towards healing and recovery, and offer referrals for long-term supports in your area. There's information about laws in your communities and basic information about medical concerns. Every 73 seconds, an American is sexually assaulted, and every 9 minutes, that victim is a child. If you or someone you know has been a victim of sexual abuse, please call 1-800-656-HOPE. The hotline number again is 1-800-656-4673. And for anyone who is having thoughts of suicide, please call the Suicide Prevention Hotline at 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255. Thank you for listening. Well, and who are you speaking to, Marilyn, in this case? When we say early intervention and when you mention that education, you mentioned a quote by Nelson Mandela early on in our conversation that education is essentially our biggest tool, right? And so
there's two things. I love some of his quotes, but there's two that really sit with me. Education is the only weapon we have to change the world. And the other one, which I love, he says, society will be judged by how we treat our children. And I have to say, in the UK, it sucks.
Yeah. How we treat children in the UK, it sucks.
Yes, it does. Because I think Lou will agree with me. Oh, there's a lot of hot air. Oh, lessons have been learned. Rubbish. People have got to turn up for the actual lesson. Government will, in the UK, the government will push all the funding, all the money onto those big charities that are completely joined to the hip. So I don't know if it's the same in America, but here it's very much, they are corporate bodies. They're just another department of government, really. And all the money goes to these people that are tied into government, have to sing off the same hymn sheet, so they can't do what Lou is doing, what myself and many other people are doing right at the coalface.
I must, if I can cut in, I agree with you up to a point. I can't say in regard to one organisation or another, but I'm not going to mention names on here, but I have heard as such. However, in the general theme of things, I do agree with you, and I would stick my neck out as well to say and be an advocate of the fact that, it's not dealt with well, it's not dealt with properly. Wherever abuse or trauma takes place, I mean, you've only got to see. I always think of, the Jimmy Savile case that incensed me when it all came out, and knowing that, people in the big in the BBC, particularly, a lot of we were in a different climate, a different time. It was the 70s, but that should not and does not matter. The fact is, many people not only suspected but knew about it. And shoved it under the carpet and kept quiet and paid people to keep quiet, or, well, I say that loosely, but that's how it came across, whether it was monetary payment or otherwise. And what happened to all the people affected? It kept going on and on. Why? Because this man was deemed to be a great man doing great things, but he was just a controller up to no good. And we've got the same with Gary Glitter. And that went on for years. We can't touch him now because he's in a different country. And, with them many, we've got the same in our royalty right now, and it's still under great suspicion. Gladly, luckily, people are talking about it again, but it doesn't matter who or what it is or who you are. If that comes from you, and that can go for anything, Bianca, Marilyn, whoever's listening, government,
it's everywhere.
Jobs, politics, the cause of the recession. It's never the people that cause it, seemingly, who take the accountability and the responsibility.
And look at the church. Look at the church. The Catholic Church. I was born a Catholic. I'm born up a Catholic. I won't have anything to do with it now. The hypocrisy literally causes me to shiver. And that's still going on. And I also, because I don't know if you have heard of in England, I don't know if you tap into it, Lou, but the independent inquiry that's been going on, and they've been looking at the church and religious abuse in the church. And for my money, we'll still be having this conversation in 10 years' time, because if you have failed with your safeguarding, then to my mind, you cannot be entrusted to have your safeguarding in-house. It should be outsourced for an external person to come and do the safeguarding, because otherwise you're just marking your own homework.
Yeah.
Well, either one of you. So I know, Lou, in our earlier conversation, you shared about your own life experience with being an suicide attempt survivor, and how in that process of or that part of your journey, you realized and brought to light that a past occurrence with you were a survivor of sexual abuse as well. And coping, somehow coping with that and navigating through those very intense feelings and of trauma response without very much help from the adults around you, outside of you had mentioned going into facilities. And Marilyn, in our earlier conversations, you're sharing your interaction or engagement with the system, so to speak, as a result of sexual abuse, not done onto you, but for your children. So as a parent, and that leading to your suicide attempts. Will you both kind of share how your interactions with the system and how their lack of response, or lack of responsibility has led or fueled kind of this passion for educating us all on sexual abuse? Is it all right with you if I go first, Marilyn?
Yeah, you go first, Lou.
Okay, so sorry to cut you off there.
No, you go first.
So for me, I wouldn't say that it was all one thing or the other, because again, it was a different time. Now, who's to say that the interventions I received, as in medication, the ECT, the electroconvulsive therapy, which is quite barbaric when I look back, but at the time, maybe it saved my life for a while, because I literally couldn't, get out of bed. It was all very difficult, very horrible. So there was all of that. Now, my issue, if you like, with the system was that there didn't seem to be any room for thinking or talking out of the box. So it's this way or no way. So there was no alternative option. Now, gladly, there are, and people are taking it. So I took that in my own hands. Now, for a while, I was at their mercy, the system, as I call it, the medical system, the social services system, and whereby some young people haven't got a home or anything to go to. Having said that, sometimes going home is not the best place. So, two-edged sword. However, I had somewhere to go to. I was, fed, watered, housed, all that kind of stuff. Some people are far less blessed. Now, later on, when I started looking within, realizing that, look, I don't think taking these tablets is helping me. All these labels put upon me, I don't think I am this, that, and the other. There was no open door to talk like that. It was like almost as if, well, I know what I'm doing. There's no room for investigation here. There's no room for discussion until, for me, I got to a point where I literally walked into a room with medical people and tore up the prescription for the next dose and said, look, this is just not happening. And they were like, oh, you're angry. And, I just lost it. And yes, of course, I'm really angry and blah, 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 blah. And I had some, awful feelings really at the time. But because of the backing of a private therapist I had at the time and trusting for once my own inner messages, my intuition, reading, and then the signposts that my intuition gave me led me synchronistically to other people, to a new doctor, to then a psychologist trained in sexual abuse. Even then, I didn't want to look at it because it's a horrible thing, any abuse. But if it comes from people known to you as well, you're dealing with many, many facets and factors that are just incomprehensible at the time. Now, you can go either way, but it's very confusing. It's very hard on a soul. And I've always been very sensitive, strong but sensitive. So, you can, maybe somebody a bit more thicker skinned wouldn't have reacted similarly, but still I've come through and I'm strong enough to do it, and unfortunately not everybody is. But my beef with the system mainly is that they still seem to think and label everybody the same, and I abhor labels. You have this because this is what fixes this, and there doesn't seem to be, or certainly didn't, any great room for discussion otherwise, or for listening to somebody telling you how they think it is, until gladly the new doctor, luckily, she did. She heard me. There's a big difference to being listened to and actually being heard. She really heard me that time. And all those stepping stones helped me actually save my own life. And then in different therapeutic interventions and what have you. Now, some people don't get to that point because they just get tired of taking the tablets. Now, just to harp on a bit more about that, it's got nothing to do with this directly, but there's a brilliant film that Matthew McConaughey did called The Dallas Buyers Club. Now, it's got nothing to do with abuse, well, his own abuse, but he, in that film, basically led quite a troubled life and got into, sex addiction and drugs and everything else. And he developed HIV and AIDS. And he was told that he only had like 2 weeks to live. And he was put on this new drug, which was actually, in effect, killing him even more. So he found what was deemed an underground doctor in Mexico, I think it was, based on a true story. And what this doctor was giving people was natural vitamins, herbs, to improve their immune system, to fight this and to build them up. But the medical profession, the social system didn't want to hear it. Ultimately, why? Because the pharmaceutical companies and the medical profession would stand to lose a lot of money. So he had to go different direction to get what he needed to change some laws, which in true life this man did do. And he lived, I believe, another 7 or 8 years longer than that. And the end of the film, miraculously, he walks in, he's soon to die that time, with the coat hanger, as I call it, with a drip on it. And he faces this panel of so-called medical authority, I believe. And they more or less call him a drug dealer. And he actually stood up. Now, I'm not advocating drugs. That's not what this is about. But he stands up and he actually says, "You're calling me a drug dealer. All of you are the biggest drug dealers ever. And nobody questions you because you're in the medical profession and you're providing prescribed drugs." And that really is ultimately my story with the system, that not many people, not enough people think out of the box and listen to what somebody's saying. Now, if a young person tells you they've been abused, they're either telling the truth, or if they're telling you a lie, they're troubled enough to make up that lie, because nobody in their right mind would. So even that needs to be listened to, because if they're lying like that, something's not right. That's my opinion and my journey, my story on that.
Lou, how much do you think that part of the system has changed? Is psychopharmacology still the go-to for young people, especially that engage with the system? Are they just being medicated? Is that still the formula?
I don't know firsthand, but I'm guessing it probably a good 85% is. And I know from research and reading that worldwide, so many people are on antidepressants sometimes, and they're making no difference at all. And they're still being palmed out. There is a small change here where doctors are allowed to prescribe books and to look at alternative therapy. But I still think predominantly it's the person's individual will that takes them down a different route. I don't think it's advocated, supported, or suggested near way enough.
And are there any alternative treatments that are there's some positive outcomes, in your region of the world? Is there anything that we're missing or are we even looking into?
I just think personally that there are lots of great talking therapies. There's coaching. Obviously, there's different counselling. I vary on my opinions in conventional counselling, because sometimes it can keep you stuck in a therapeutic way of thinking. It's good to have therapy to move you forward, not to just keep you dependent on therapy, because it can go so analytical that you don't live. You just think about everything and want to understand and fix everything. But I think there needs to be, I'm not sure about anything missing, Bianca, but I think there needs to be more cohesiveness, more collaboration, more allowing different ways of working. Now, I also teach Tai Chi and Qigong, so I work with the body and energy. And I also coach through that medium, because the body holds on to energy, and that can be troublesome as well. And that can develop in physical manifestations of disease, as well as mental and emotional. So there are lots of alternative things, I'll say, rather than therapies or interventions to try. For some people, jogging can take them to a different place, gardening, sailing. And all these things have their place if it helps you and helps you unlock the chains of your own making because of your own experiences, because that's basically what I would describe it as. It's your own prison, because you get locked into it mentally, in your head, in your heart. Let's not forget that one as well, in your body, in your energy system, your soul. Then, whatever can help you. I've tried lots of things, and some things I've liked, some things I haven't. And ultimately, I've been blessed with the will and the strength to build that resilience that Marilyn was talking about earlier. And that comes from keep trying things. It's like an elastic band. And now I realize that the whole world has its own troubles. I used to think, I was the only one, and my family was the worst family in the world, or my environment was the worst. And now I realize, and I see, not to one degree or another, everybody's got something. And it's just developing different ways of managing, coping, surviving and thriving ultimately. And it's actually ultimately, and this is where my coaching comes into play, it's knowing thyself. Carl Jung, there's many quotes, but there's one by Joseph Campbell, I believe from memory, it goes something like this. I think it's the cave you're not willing to go into is where the treasure you seek is. Something like that. And basically, the darkness you're not wanting to look at is where the light is. And unless you go there, Marilyn mentioned it earlier, because of the Tai Chi and everything, it is about working from the bottom up, the base up, the roots, like a tree. If you don't deal with the roots of it, it doesn't mean you get stuck there. In fact, I wouldn't want anyone to. That's not how I work. But you need to have that level of understanding, that comprehension of where something comes from, to then be able to work with it and through it and out the other side, ultimately to change your life and turn things around. But you've got to know yourself, because what works for you may not work for me, and vice versa. One size does not fit all. And when you know yourself, I know more about my crazy side. I could flip over all sorts of things, but it's awareness. If you know yourself, and also, you know, in my coaching, we talk about your sort of ego side, the part that, you know, destructs things, destroys what we want, what we go for. If you know the way that works for you, your mechanisms, and you can stop yourself and turn things around, that's what it's all about. And I believe that's what people who are equipped with that knowledge and that understanding, that know-how early on, that's why they thrive in life more, because they can work around things. They know themselves better, or they're willing to look at it, because we all have the mental side, the crazy side, the genius side, the lack, the this, the that. To some degree or another, we're all made up of different parts. I truly believe that, and I defy anyone to say any different.
Well, Lou, you mentioned this willingness to go into the darkness in order to find the light, and just from my own experience, my own lived experience with suicidality. Sometimes that's not a far travel, you know. I'm not having to go anywhere. I'm in the darkness, you know.
Yeah.
And so, how do you, while being surrounded by that darkness, how do you muster up the, you know, strength and will, you know, as you've assigned, you know, those words to what it takes to survive, you know, thoughts of suicide and you know, repeated traumas. How do you do that? What do you tell someone who's in the darkness? What do you tell a parent who is facing, you know, the most darkest hour, you know, with their children? And Marilyn, I kind of pass the conversation to you as well to speak about that.
For me, sorry, Marilyn, I just
no, you carry on.
That is, for me, what I think is ultimately really important is to give that person a space to actually be real about where they are and what's going on. Now, I believe, and don't get me wrong, everyone and everything in my journey has played a valuable part. As I say, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but it's got me here, so I'm grateful. Now, one thing which I think could have been different is, and could have helped me more, is if I'd have had that space to just investigate, to just have someone facilitate that process and not tell me, you shouldn't feel like this, you're young, you've got your whole life ahead of you, why does this keep happening, blah, blah, blah. Well, I didn't know. If I knew, I wouldn't be in that place in the first place. Now, I think that's ultimately important, because what I did, and it may just be my personality too, because we're all different, let's not forget that I increased the fear because I was frightened of it. I increased the worry because I worried that I was so worried. So it became obsessive. Now, that may be partly down to my personality or then. So there is that aspect. But I do believe, and as a coach, I like to do that, is, so you feel suicidal. Okay, let's look at that. Not let's try and not talk about it. Now, not with the vein that I keep you there, but then it's choice. It's like, okay, so that's where you're at now. where would you like to be? How would you like things to be different? And I'm not being flippant saying that, because I know from personal experience myself, when you're in that dark place, you may not be able to even go there. But it's giving that person that space, and then to look outside of, it's like looking outside the window at the sunlight. I wish I could be there. So, okay, so what could you do right in this moment? Just one thing that might take you closer to there. And it's looking at all of those aspects, because although I've been there myself and everything, I honestly would say that it wasn't a case that that's how I was thinking or feeling 24 hours in one day. I was obsessively on it because it consumed me, and I would welcome other people saying their thing, but when I look back, honestly, whether I was in a therapeutic environment or not, there would have been times where I might have had to go to the shop to buy something. I was more lucid. I was not falling apart at the seams every second. Or I had to have a wash, or I had to do something else. So the point I'm making is you're not in it normally 24 hours of every day. It is horrible to bear because it consumes you, and it continues, and it feels like there's no way out. But if we can tackle those moments where you're not in the thick fog of it, that's the chance you have to make a different choice, because it is all about choices. It is all about choice. So that's me.
Thank you, Lou. Marilyn, what are your thoughts?
I'd like to, because there's so much stuff that Lou said that I can absolutely resonate with. Can I just, and then I'll go on to me, because I just would like to draw some stuff out of what Lou said, because it's so true. The pharmaceutical companies, I was drugged up to the eyeballs. They are so powerful around the world. It's the same. The money, and they will not let people look at alternative stuff. Aside of doing this, because I lost income with the lockdown because of self-employed, I started marketing, because I've got to earn some money. I've also started marketing aloe vera, right? Now, aloe vera is grown in the Arizona desert. And the business that I'm working for to earn money alongside all this other stuff, because I believe in natural products. Aloe vera has been around since 2000 BC. It is amazing. It's like the medicine plant. It absolutely, get that down your throat. It absolutely improves, maintains, supports your immunity, and stress lowers that immunity. So that I'd love to say that, because, and you know, the medical profession, and Lou is right, are so blinded by pharmaceuticals. They don't want to look at the alternative. Looking at age groups as well, and stories of my own children, I think it's a massive thing to say, as a mother, this was my best friend that was doing it, but I believe my children. And I think mothers, as I quite agree with Lou, if you're going to make this stuff up, then you've got something seriously wrong. So only, I reckon in England, I think it's only 2% of reports are actual false allegations. So you have to start from a position of truth. I believe you. And another thing that is on my journey that I've learned is that children up to the age of 7 cannot make up graphic stories of sexual abuse. They've either seen it, which of course is an abuser's little pull-in to get them used to looking at pornography, or they've experienced it. And I think that should be really considered by police around the world. A child of 7, the brain has not developed enough to imagine those things. So I think that should be part of evidence. And I absolutely agree with Lou as well about a choice. And I'm an ambassador of a thing called the Thrive program. And they talk about this. If you say, oh, I am depressed because the doctor told me. No, you have given yourself permission. If I said to you, here's £1 million, snap out of it tomorrow, do you think that might help you? And there are lots of different, I'm so proud to have Lou as one of the many mentors that we're trying to get on associates, because you can move from one to another. It's not a one-stop shop. You know, people are different. People meld with different people. They have different issues. That person brings you on in leaps and bounds, and now maybe you need something else. So I want to put all those people and collaborate in a group for everybody to see. And, you know, it is such a difficult thing, and it's so individual. Now, when I was teaching, my thing was music, as I said, and Lou mentioned sport, a great release. You know, if you split down recreation, it actually means recreation. You recreate yourself in that moment. It could be reading, any form of escape. It could be playing a musical instrument. It is, as Lou said, sailing, whatever it is that transports you to another place. Recreation is essential. You recreate yourself. And I used to say this to parents. I said, well, I'm teaching your children what the sports teachers are doing, everything else. We are teaching your children a recreation. And people don't take enough time to recreate themselves. It is my view. Now, when I knew about my children, I mean, there were signs there and physical signs as well, which I was saying to Lou today, because we were talking about a training course that I do, education course that Lou, we were going through it together, talking about the children that are witnessing domestic abuse. And I've called it forgotten and afraid. You know, you have these Barneys, you start chucking items at each other, you forget or think you forget the children, and you don't realise or even think that they're probably still awake, listening, and how frightened they must be, and that trauma. And that is such a real thing. But when I was told, with the police knocked on my doorstep and told me that they were suspecting my friend, blah, 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 I just fell apart. I couldn't believe it. It was like a tsunami had come through my living room. And my interview was 9 hours. Then the boys came home from school and they were all interviewed. And
Marilyn, I hate to interrupt you. Will you kind of share what that experience was like for our listeners?
I felt there's a book on Amazon that I wrote a book about it, because I had to wait 8 months before I could find anyone to talk to. And when I found someone to talk to, the woman said to me, "Oh, I only deal with divorce." I said, "Well, divorce is a walk in the park. I've done that, thanks." I had so many useless therapists, and they didn't do what Lou is doing. I love Lou's style. She takes you through it. I can't bear these people that go, "And how did it feel? How do you think it feels?" My children have been sexually abused by my best friend, the head teacher of the school, a churchman. How do you think it feels? And I would get up and walk out because I was so angry. And when the police came and I sat down, I accused them of abusing me. I said, "You don't know my friend. He's a good man. How dare you sit there and say this to me, blah, 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 blah." And they were saying, "Well, look, we absolutely believe." So I was a deputy head. I was a very successful teacher. I had never heard of grooming. I said, "What do you mean being groomed? What do you mean being groomed? What are you talking about?" And I went, "What is this thing called grooming?" You know, I was brought up with the funny old man in the park, you know, "Don't talk to strangers, that'll be fine, you'll be okay." And no, he described grooming, how you are first, you know, we're not talking about abduction here. The person wheels their way in to the people that are actually looking after the children, the guardians or the parents. They suck up and get very friendly with those people. It can be 4 years of befriending that adult, and then they've already had their eye on the child before they start then doing the abuse. Offline, it's a long process of catchy, slowly catchy monkey, working like a little snake in the grass and slowly isolating you from your actual friendship group. So they become your absolute support mechanism. And you don't notice it happening. It is like a spider trying to catch a fly, and you get caught in the web and you can't get out of it, because they've also targeted people that are vulnerable. Now, when I go to the prisons, it really is chilling when they say, I've had somebody say to me, "We smell vulnerability like French perfume. We choose our next victim by the micro moments and micro movements in their behaviour. We are the best A-star people watchers. It's chilling. And another thing they said is, until adults and parents step up to the line and understand and identify our behaviours, we'll just keep doing it. We don't even have to knock on the door. We just walk through it because parents don't want to think it ever happens to them. And when it does, my God, you don't want to be me.
Marilyn,
my world ended.
Marilyn, so just to clarify, you were told by the police that your sons were being sexually abused by their teacher, who was your best friend, and as a result, you have dedicated your life's work to preventing this, to educating on the subject, and you've yourself gone into prisons and talked to pedophiles and sexual abusers.
Yeah.
Face to face after this experience.
Yeah, because I want to learn. I want to understand what I'm not, they are the most hated people in prison. I mean, child abusers are the most loathed people worldwide. And, what they do is monstrous, but they were born in this world as a normal child. Things happened, and I am not making excuses for their behavior. It's gross, but there are reasons that should have been picked up earlier on in their early years of weird behaviours that were not looked at. And to some extent, they've been failed. To a huge extent, they're victims themselves. So I like to steer a central path. I don't want to be, like I was in a domestic abuse situation for 19 years, but I'm very on board with men that are abused. I don't want to be a judgmental, I can only deal with this side. I only talk to the victims of abuse. You've got to talk to the people that abuse. What were their issues? Otherwise, you can't fix it. You've got to look at the whole wheel of understanding. And as ever gross it is, you learn a lot. So you ask them, when did you first start feeling these things? These, because they love to talk about it. When did you start, fiddling, if you like? And a lot of them, I would say 70% are honest enough to say, when I was 10 or 11 years old, I would say I started fiddling with my schoolmates. The amount of peer-on-peer abuse that goes on in schools is huge. Overly sexualized behaviors. Why? Where's that coming from? It's gross, and people just don't want to look at it. But you have to. You can't be blind to it. But I bounced from one therapist after another, and then I went in the end. I was sent to a psychiatrist because I wrote my book, wrote it in 4 days. It's called Never Take No for an Answer, and it's a mother's story of the different emotions I went through. Every chapter in it: denial, betrayal, guilt. Guilt is the one that was the hardest thing to turn out of my cupboard drawer, if you know what I mean. It took me years to overcome the guilt. Why is it my guilt? And you have to forgive yourself. That took a long time, forgiving myself. It wasn't my fault, but I kept saying, but he was my friend. He was my friend. I made him my friend. I let my kids go and stay with him. That's me. That's me. No, it is not me. It is the strength of their manipulation. But I've been 9 months still not seeing the therapist, going down and downhill, more and more drugs, more and more fix-its, more and more beta blockers, stronger antidepressants. And I was at a dinner party, and I was actually sat next to a police officer in plain clothes. And I had planned, this is a Saturday night, and I planned on the Tuesday I was going to take my own life. I had all my paracetamols lined up, and I had everything to go. And I knew on that Tuesday, my husband and the kids were all going to be on trips out with the school, and my husband was in London. That's the day I had designated. So I'm at this party, and I'm really bright and breezy and everything else. And this guy says to me, name was Gary, he saved my life actually, because he said to me, how are you? I said, I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. And he went, you can't be. You can't be, because I actually deal in child protection, and I know how mothers in your situation feel. So I got up and went to the bathroom because I thought, oh my golly, I want to get out of here. I don't want him to, dig any deeper. So I went to the cloakroom, and when I came out, he was standing there, and he said, I know what you're thinking of doing. I said, you know nothing about me. You don't know what I'm doing. Get out, get away from me. He said, listen, he's not worth it. I said, what are you talking about? What are you doing? Who's not worth it? What do you mean? What do you mean? And he said, I know what you're thinking of doing. And he's not worth it. And you've got 4 children that are going to need you. And I'm going to tell your husband what I think you're considering doing. And I literally ran out the house, grabbed my bag, ran all the way home, sat on a pavement under a lamplight, cried like a baby, saying, please, God, I only know how to die. Please help me live. I can still cry about it now. Please help me live. And then I went to a psychiatrist, a Canadian guy, really nice chap, and actually quite brutal, to be honest. He said to me, what do you want? I said, I want my life back. He said, you can't have it back. I said, well, why not? I want my life back. One day I was there feeding 4 children and doing the garden, and then this happens. He said, but you can't have it back, darling. What's happened has happened. You can't change it. I said, well, that's really brutal, isn't it? He said, well, you can't have it back, so let's deal with that. You can't have any of that back, but you can find it again in some way. So what I'm going to ask you to do, I know you think it's brutal, I know you think it's horrible, but he said, you're stronger than you think. And he said, I want you to tell me now 3 things from your childhood that meant everything to you. Oh, I said, that's easy. He said, well, what is it? I said, animals, nature, and music. He said, right, stop right there. That is still in your DNA. Right now, you have been thrown out of an aircraft at 40,000 feet without a parachute, and you are just blood and mess over the tarmac. Now, if you've been knocked down in a road accident, you'd be covered in plaster casts and everybody would be running circles around you, but nobody can actually see that internal mess that's happened. Only you. And that's the sad part. So he said, right, what we do, to my husband, he said, right, do you have any animals? No. So he said, right, get her a puppy. So, and he said, right, you like your music? You haven't done it for a while? No. Right, get her back to playing music and just spend as much time with that puppy outside. Go to the seaside, because I love sitting by the water, and then build slowly, slowly, slowly. Now, you will be a different person. But who knows to say you might be an even better person? You're maybe less trusting. You may be different, but that's not to say you're going to be worse. You'll just be different. And I walked out. I was furious. And I said, what a stupid man. I couldn't. My husband said, right, we're going to get a puppy. And we got, oh my golly, that's why I so believe in animals. You lovely Americans did this research that animals, furry animals, reduce emotional stress by 30%. Yeah. That dog, and referencing yet again Lou with the cat, that dog was my life. And when he died 5 years ago, I thought my heart would never, ever mend. He meant the world to me because he was just there. Every tear, every crack in the china. But from that moment on, that guy at the dinner party turned my life around, and I mention him in my book. And then I really worked at it, and everybody helped me. My friends helped me, and I do agree. So agree with Lou. I made a choice that day, and it was tough. It was bloody. It was dark. It was awful. But then I found a thing called the Thrive program, for which I'm an ambassador. And this does talk about, I used to overthink all the time. And it changes that, which is basically a bit like Lou does, that says, you can change your thinking. Your thinking, if you overthink, it becomes your belief system. And then you go round and round and round this sort of, like a centrifugal force. It's awful, and it is a horrible, dark place to be. But I have come off all drugs, absolutely all of them, and I am thriving better than I ever was. I would say definitely freedom from abuse, and this passion to change children and help children and help parents. I will take to my grave, because every part of me lives and breathes freedom from abuse. And anyone that is brave enough to put their life story on the line, like Lou, you can't put a price on lived experience. It's essential to really understand the dark areas of someone's mind and hold their hand through it. And I get very angry when people go on about, oh, so-and-so took their own life, how selfish. I'm sorry, it doesn't feel like that. I thought I was doing my family a favour. Because everything I'd done has brought pain. And it made perfect sense. I'm not that person now. Thank goodness I didn't do it. But I understand what it's like to be there. And that's why people like Lou are priceless. And that's my story.
Can I just say, Marilyn, thank you for those compliments. Thank you very much. And also, you mentioned a book, but you omitted to say what it was. And I think you need to share that, if you may.
Oh, what, the one I wrote? Or
yes, you skipped over.
The one I wrote is called Never Take No for an Answer. It's not exactly War and Peace. It's a very raw story. And it was sold, loads of mothers and parents brought it over here, caught in this same... I can email, you don't need to buy it. Anybody emails me, I'll send it out as an electronic file. But it was just the raw story. And I start off with how I first met the man that changed my life. And it was in a church pew. I was there with my 2-year-old son, who will be 40 this year. I was 6 weeks off having my little girl, Nikki, and the twins weren't even, considered. And this man sat behind me and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "What a lovely little boy. Where's he going to school?" And I went, "What?" And he said, "What do you mean going to school? He's 2 years old." And I said, "It's not Harrow." And he said, "Well, I'm the new head teacher at the church school here, and it's very good that boys have a male on the staff. So when you have your baby, come and see me." And that was the day I met the man that later on was going to totally change my life. At that moment in that church service that morning. So we're going back to 1982, and I didn't know for another 20 years what was going to come out of that friendship and that relationship. And it was the grooming. We started, having a coffee. I mean, nothing sexual at all. Having a coffee after church every Sunday. And then I began working for him, and then I got, the deputy head, and then, then I got divorced, and he'd help look after the children. Very clever game. It's the absolute, an art form of deception like no other. And there's another book I read when I couldn't decide whether I could have the courage to leave my domestic abuse situation. And I would urge anyone to read this. It's called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And Lou mentioned fear. Fear is a blocker. Fear comes from your subconscious somewhere. So, no, we mustn't do this. We mustn't do this. Don't listen to that inner voice, that subconscious fear. Fear you can overcome. You can overcome, don't let it block you, but feel the fear and do it anyway is what I read, sat on a bookshop floor one night when they were opening late, and I found this book, opened it up, and there it was, Why People Stay in Domestic Abuse Relationships. It's so largely to do with the material bits. You've got a house, you've got a car. That's not a relationship, that's stuff. And it really encouraged me, and from that moment on, I thought, right, I'm leaving. Took me 2 years, but I've never looked back. And I think these life experiences like Lou has and myself and many others, it forms the person you are today. And it isn't what happens to you that matters. It's what you do with it that matters. I made a choice that I could either kill this man or I could do something good for children around the world, and which is what Lou's doing. We can go global now with the lockdown. We're doing all our courses. Lou and our other associates do it all over Zoom. Geography doesn't matter anymore. And I would urge anyone, don't sit in silence. Reach out. Like Lou, I didn't have the right people around me. And, I've never lost my faith. I can't go to church. I find it difficult, but I've never lost my faith. And I think it is that God-given faith that actually held me together, that I was meant to meet Gary that day at that dinner party. Yeah. And I will never lose that because, it's the one thing nobody could destroy. It's the one thing nobody could take away from me. And to this day, I feel that, and I don't see this in a sort of a Bible bashing way at all, but I feel an additional empowerment to do what I do because I couldn't do this without that spiritual help. I truly couldn't, because it's so ugly.
Yeah, and I think anytime any one person is brought to contemplating life and death, contemplating their own mortality, I think that there's an imminent spiritual, that's an imminent spiritual discussion.
Yeah.
You can't remove the spirituality from suicidality, and I think that that's really a large part of the construct that people debate. You mentioned people thinking that suicide is selfish. Another misconception is that those that consider suicide or have attempted suicide are faithless or without, spirituality. And that couldn't be further from the truth, as you
absolutely,
Marilyn, those constructs are conversion. There's a conversion of those constructs, and you have to confront, your spirituality, your faith, all these things you're confronting in those moments. And just the occurrence of Gary, being direct with you and like you said, that saved your life,
It did.
And just as much as I think that's the good why, right? Because too often somebody has died by suicide, and the lost survivors, that's the question that they're left with. Why? Yes. How could I have prevented it? But you were a part of the good why.
Yes.
It's why did this person ask me directly, how I was feeling? Why did this person, call me out and say, I know what you're thinking. And I'm not going to allow you to do that. This is an instance of the question of why being asked in the best case scenario.
Absolutely. I mean, I do owe him my life. I do, without a doubt, because I had it planned. And of course, very often as well, I don't know if Lou's found this, when you're in that dark place and you feel you've got a solution, there's an energy of almost happiness and release, because you think, I've sorted it. I've got it. I've now grasped it. Excellent. And for a few days before that thing is going to happen, I was becoming elated, because I thought, I found the answer.
Yeah. End in sight. There's an end in sight.
Yes. And I just wish I could try and explain that to people who would want to be, and Lou would say the same, in this awful dark space. But some people are, and some people walk away from it because they're frightened. And I can understand they're frightened of it, but hold someone's hand, for goodness sake, and see what you can do. This is 2020. We're not in the dark ages anymore. There's a whole load of people, thank goodness now, like Lou, out there you can reach out to. Not so a long time ago. And, and I do urge my daughter-in-law, whose birthday is today, baby due any minute, I think of her because 3 years ago, her father took his own life, and you wonder what his demons were. He was not a reformed alcoholic. He would binge and take pills at the same time. Then he'd go dry, then he'd binge. And it was obviously a function of mistiming. And we found him on the hay bales in their farm. And you think, how sad, because he's now never saw his 3 gorgeous grandchildren by the other daughter and this new baby to be born. How sad that no one bothered to open him up a bit,
Yeah. Gosh.
And this, and Lou referred to it. I did a training course. All the courses we do are about awareness, as I say, of indicators of behaviours and risk. And a lady, I was up in the north of England, and I was doing a training course on a whole day course for frontline practitioners, and of every sort of the impact of abuse, the abuser, their problems, and I trained police on Pedophile, the mind of the pedophile as well. That's really interesting. And this lady came up to me and said, "You took me through a door into a room I didn't want to go." And she said, "I'm so glad I went through that door." And that's what Lou said about the treasure that you're looking for is in that room. And I said, so now what are we going to do? I said, what do you want to do? And then we got her sorted, and and she got the right trauma, because this is trauma. This isn't I've broken a fingernail, or I've been made redundant. How awful as it is! This is trauma, and people that are in this need someone who understands trauma. And there are a lot of excellent people out there, but there are also a lot of cowboy counsellors as well.
Yeah, and I think that's really the distinction, is something that you mentioned very early on, and Lou, you've mentioned as well, is the importance of education, because the purpose of that we are after, the objective is to have a greater understanding. It's not to perpetuate fear, and there's There's a fine line, because some people are comfortable not understanding, and that's really a position out of fear that if they do hear about it, that it's going to trigger a response in them that they're not comfortable with. People aren't comfortable with feeling these intense feelings. Some people aren't comfortable with anger. Lou, as you mentioned, this going into the darkness, some people are not comfortable in that dark space. It's scary for them, So how do you speak to that person that maybe wants to understand, but is a little too afraid to go into that dark space?
Again, for me, I believe it comes from using your intuition and creating a safe space for them. And, I have had this myself. Your trust issues are all over the shop. You don't know who to trust, whatever. But, I've worked with some people I haven't actually liked very much, but that didn't make a difference because they helped me. And going on the back of what Marilyn said earlier as well, sometimes it is tough love. I worked with young people before at risk, and I remember this young lady who I had to disarm, actually, is the best way I can say it. And you could have, if you'd have seen the look on her face, she was ready to stick a knife in me for what I did that day, because I called her up on her behaviour and how she looked and what she was doing to hide herself. And she just burst out crying. And it all emanated from her making a noise because she was acting out, and it was disturbing me. And we were in a public place waiting to go into a workshop, and she was telling me she wasn't going. So she was acting out. She was about 15. And I can't remember how the conversation went, but in a nutshell, I said, you look really, really quite mean, quite ugly when you look at me like that. And that was it. She was caked up with makeup, and she said she stopped her music and she started crying. She said, I am ugly. And that was the point of entry. And I took it, regardless of the outcome, because it wasn't about me. And I don't mean that like a martyr. It truly wasn't. I was in that space with her, present. Yeah. And that is so important. And I wasn't following a script. I wasn't following a system. I was listening and going with it and taking that chance. Now, she could have erupted in me. If she'd have been me, she probably would have done. Or she could have gone the other way, which I could also go. And she fell apart. Yeah. And she opened up the doorway, and we looked at that, and off came her makeup. She was crying so much. And we got to a bit of why she felt she was ugly and why she felt ugly. Never mind how she felt she looked. And, after that, no makeup. She tidied her face up a little bit, and she still didn't warm to me particularly. She shouldn't show me, but I knew in her language how she presented to me, in her body language, but also just in her energy, that when she just said, yeah, okay, I'll go in, it was like a thank you without saying thank you. And she went into that workshop on her own. And before, she was frightened of going in because she felt ugly. That was the bottom line. And she had good reason to be, from what I recall, that she felt that way, not that she was. And I think that is ultimately it, is like, sometimes it is tough love. Sometimes it's like listening to what isn't being said more than what is being said and hooking into that. and picking someone up on it. You've got to trigger that out of somebody. And if you're scared to go there, somebody once said to me, a coach, and I listened to that, a good man, he said, people often talk about, some people are hard to reach. It's not they're hard to reach, it's that you're not willing to go there.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And my husband, Roger, when I met him, I didn't know his story at all. And this shows how deep it is. I mean, we met in 1998. We married in the year 2000. This happened in 2002. He sort of told me that, he got... that dodgy chaplain. So he was he was 55 when we got married. We've been married now 20 years. It wasn't really until he was, with all this stuff we've been doing together for 20 years, it wasn't until maybe 8 years ago that he really told me what happened. And that is, I'm a safe person to be with because, I do it all the time. So it wasn't like I was going to fall apart with him telling me. That's how deep it was. That he couldn't spit it out. It was blocked. And it's so right what Lou says, you're blocked. And with my son, one of my boys, who was he liked blonde-haired boys with blue eyes, okay? So his twin brother has got black hair and black eyes, so he was the wrong type. He fancied blonde-haired boys and blue eyes. And we didn't know what was going on with my son, really, the build-up to the police coming to the front door. And he would get really quite violent, and he wasn't a violent child. And I need to say this as well, and Lou and I were talking about this earlier this morning, it isn't just the aggressive person, it's the person also that wants to hide away, that wants to be isolated, that doesn't want to be called by name and come to the front of the class, doesn't want to be play a part in a play or stand up and do reading. They want to stay within themselves. That is also a signal, not just someone that's knocking 7 bells of hell at people. But Roger came home that day and he got very violent after the police had been. And Michael had never done this in his life, but he was effing this, effing that, and calling me effing this, effing that. And he said, out, in the car. And he was about 17 then, right? And he'd get in the car, and he took him to the pub, and he said, sit there. He brought him a pint, and he said, right, drink that. What is wrong with you, pal? Tell me. He said, I've been where you've been. Now tell me, be your own best mate. And he burst into tears. Just burst into tears. And do you know what he said? He said, Jeff Carney told me my mother didn't love me. Jeff Carney told me that I've been chosen by God for this special love. And I don't know if I'm gay because I've only had sex with a man. So he had 2 or 3 girlfriends that had said to me, before I ever knew any of this, lovely girlfriends who had said to me, we let him touch us, my son, but we can't touch him. And it never clicked. Why not? I just thought he was the baby of the family, shy, because he was shy. And of course, that's why he was targeted, because he was shy and he was vulnerable and he didn't have a big gob. He knew he could keep my son quiet. He knew he could frighten him. And he did. But my son's physical stuff was there to see. And as quite rightly Lou mentions about the physical stuff as well, my son had stopped growing. He was a twin. His twin brother was shooting up. He stopped at the age of 13. And the trauma, severe trauma, will block the brain from, it uses its energy to get you through the trauma, to get the young person through the trauma. So he just stopped growing. And he was very frail, very, very puny. And I thought, wow, what's wrong with him? Because the doctors kept saying, well, because he had developed asthma, he developed psoriasis, he had developed stomach migraine, he developed a nervous twitch in his eye, his growth had stopped. So they said it was all the medication. No, it wasn't. It was the trauma that was causing all of those things. And then after this man went to prison, because he came out of court, having said he was guilty, he walked away with this fine. And I thought, no, you don't, pal. You're going down, mate. And down he went. And then my son started university and he grew 6 inches. He's now 6'3". And I didn't know and I didn't know this until about 7-8 years ago. It was a child psychologist that told me, was a pediatrician, something like that trauma blocks the growth. And then when that trauma is released, the brain comes on board again, and then it picks up where it left off. And he's now the tallest of my 3 sons. Yeah. So, I was teaching at a school earlier this year. We were training, I was educating 6th formers on dating abuse, teenage abuse, which, thank goodness, you Americans are right up there with. It's under the radar. They're not even on the radar here in the UK. And there was a lad there that I thought he was in year 8. And I went, that tiny little lad. I said, how did he get in here? I mean, this is year 12 and 13. He's about year 8. And this head teacher, head of year, said, oh, no, he's always like that. I said, no, hang on a minute. That's not usual. I said, what's going on? Oh, I don't know. He's got a lot of issues. I said, hang on a minute. I want a word with you. You talk about a lot of issues. Are you investigating those issues? Because I'm telling you right now, that boy is in severe trauma. That's what's caused that stunted growth. It's not a hormonal thing. That boy is puny. He is frail. He's got severe issues with trauma, and it's your job to sort it out.
Wow.
And you see, the teachers are not trained. I don't know how they're trained in America, but here we have a lot of teachers that come out of university with a degree. Then they go and do a PGCE, postgraduate certificate of education, 3 short semesters. They have 2 hours of child protection. That's it. So it's not like doing a Bachelor of Education degree. And then they go into a school and they're completely ill-equipped. Completely ill-equipped. And some of them, and I'm known because I've had them to mentor when I was teaching, some of them should never even consider teaching as a career. They're just not the right persona. But of course they think it's a safe job.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It will be interesting to see how in education, how education will be impacted, moving forward post COVID-19 with the introduction of distance learning, and the emphasis on distance learning. It will be interesting to see, that dynamic if that continues to be the safe, job for some of these people.
Did you have that in America?
Have what the training?
Do youngsters in America have to go to university for 3 years to be a teacher, or do you have this system where you can go and do a history degree and then decide, can't get a job, I know, I'll go and do a postgraduate education a year?
There are different programs to become a teacher here in America. I'm not entirely familiar with all that's required. I do know that there are fast track programs where you could have a degree in another field of study and do a certificate program to be a substitute teacher, to be in the school. And so I think that is definitely a problem that transcends borders,
May I just interrupt? Because Lou said she's got to go.
Yes. I just kind of wanted to wrap and come full circle. I wanted to make sure that both you, Lou, and Marilyn, how are you feeling in this moment? Because we've talked about some pretty intense things today. I think that, as we relate it to the purpose of the podcast, bringing survivors here to tell their stories safely, responsibly, sometimes when we enter into that dark space, even to talk about these experiences, it could bring up some feelings, some memories, some thoughts about our own, journeys. And so I just want to check in with you ladies and make sure that you're in this moment feeling okay, feeling safe to wrap our conversation for today.
Is Lou there?
Yeah. No, I am. It's just I'm conscious of time because there's something I need to do.
Understandable.
I'm okay. Sometimes it hits me later. I know that I'll feel a bit vulnerable for a bit, and a bit, my way is, I can feel a little bit nervous or whatever, but you know what? It's a beautiful day here still. I'll wrap up what I need to do. I'll go take myself for a walk for 20 minutes. I do my Qigong training, which cleans my energy. And, if I feel uncomfortable for a little bit, it'll pass. And I was just conscious of time, but I didn't want to interrupt things. And also just to open the space to leave our contact details if, people want to reach out and work with us in any way. And just to thank you, Bianca, for facilitating this, and also, Marilyn for contributing, and all of us being here together. But no, I'll be okay. And if not, I can reach out and write and do whatever I need to do. I think there's plenty of resources at hand. But thank you for asking. That in itself makes me feel better. So thank you.
Absolutely. And you are also welcome to reach out to me directly too, after the podcast, if anything comes up. And I appreciate you sharing just the importance of being aware of self and having a safety plan. Thank you.
I so welcome this opportunity. It's rare and it's so needed. And even if you sort of go, phew, at the end of it, so what? So what? We, Lou, myself, have been taught ways of coping. We have coping mechanisms. And the same thing. I'll probably take the dog for a walk. It's just for a short walk. It's a lovely sunny evening. Glass of wine, move on. But our details, and Lou is on, and there's lots of people on our, building up on our associate site now. It's www.freedom-abuse.org. So www.freedom-abuse.org. And if you want training, we can do it over Zoom. If you want mentoring and support, Lou and all the other associates there, go and it's a bit like a pick and mix. Find what you think you're looking for. And that's what I want to build up, a whole load of people before lockdown ends. So we're good to go and hit the ground running. And I can't thank you enough, Bianca. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just for me, Bianca, just personally, yes, there, but also because I hesitated last time, mistrusting myself, but I can be found on LinkedIn under my full name, which is LOURDES-ANNE, and then Requena, REQUENA, so Lourdes-Anne Requena, or 2 emails, info@Lourdes-Anne, all one word, LOURDESANNE -Requena, REQUENA.com, or LOUREQUENA@hotmail.co.uk for coaching, Tai Chi, Qigong, or indeed, if it's not me, to signpost over to Marilyn or whoever. That's the beauty of this as well. And thank you once again, and God bless you both.
Thanks, Lou.
So much.
Have a good evening.
Yeah.
Thank you. Take care. And Bianca, look forward to the links for us to share.
Please.
And maybe we can talk again sometime.
Absolutely.
Lovely. Thank you.
Much more to speak about for the listeners also. Marilyn gave the great resources, Feel the Fear, Do It Anyway, and Never Take No for an Answer as 2 of those words. And if the listeners, if anybody has listened to today's podcast and is feeling, some pretty intense emotions or same thing, it's difficult being in this dark space, please reach out to me at the UNNI Podcast. We're on all social media sites. Please reach out to continue the conversations with Lou, with the information and the handles that she gave, as well as Marilyn, because we understand this is a very sensitive topic, and we don't want anyone to be left out there with some unresolved feelings or some resurfaced feelings that have them in that dark space. So thank you, ladies, again for
thank you. Both.
Our pleasure. Thank you
for our audience. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. Bye-bye. Have a good evening or good morning.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for your time today. I'm your host, Bianca McCall. Remember, connect, create, be constructive. Help me and the many others doing amazing things in the space of suicide prevention, and reach in to give permission to those in crisis to reach out. Please, I welcome for you to share your thoughts, your feelings, your efforts, or the efforts of others in your communities with me. Please, you can find me on YouTube, on IG, on Facebook, under my agency's name, Desert Rose Counseling Group, Or you can find me on LinkedIn under my name, Bianca McCall. We also have a website where we'll be posting our podcasts and updates on information. And until next time, stay safe, be well, be heroes.